Welcome back. In this section, we will continue to look at instructional strategies that work. Here are some instructional strategies that are highlighted in the book, What Works in Schools, Translating Research into Action by Robert Marzano. As we look through all of these instructional strategies today, please bear in mind that the effective teacher has more instructional strategies at their disposal than the ineffective teacher. So we want to make sure we provide you with as many instructional strategies as possible when you go into the classroom. In his review of research on instructional strategies that work, John Hattie proposed the following list of strategies that he found to be effective. What we see here is the strategy listed along with the effect size. The effect size reports how many standard deviations the average score in the experimental group, that is the group that uses the instructional strategy, is above the average score in the control group. In other words, everything else being equal, the typical student who receives tutoring will obtain achievement scores 0.5 standard deviations higher than the typical student who does not receive tutoring. This will translate into a 19 percentile point gain. You see that tutoring had the same effect size as mastery learning, followed by homework, simulation and games, computer-assisted instruction, instructional media, learning hierarchies, and individualization. Now, Marzano, his group, that is Gaddy, Pickering, and Pollock, also combined some instructional strategies. And they decided to categorize the instructional strategies into those that affected student achievement. We compare what they did with what John Hattie found. And as you can see here, what Marzano and company found was that identifying similarities and differences received the highest percentile gain, followed by summarizing and note-taking, reinforcing effort and providing recognition, homework and practice, non-linguistic representations, cooperative learning, setting objectives and providing feedback, generating and testing hypotheses, and finally, questions, cues, and advanced organizers rounded out their list. One thing about Marzano and company is that they were bearing in mind the assessments that were specific to the content being taught while a particular instructional strategy was being used. And that's how they were able to figure out the percentile gain. We might call the instructional strategies here to discover how successful they were. We call that curriculum sensitive assessment. Now, our third category that we want to look at today is useful suggestions for the classroom. And this is quite a long list, but what happens with this list is that behaviors have been combined so that you could see what general instruction would accompany the behavior. For example, identifying similarities and differences. The behavior that would be associated with that would be assigning in class and homework tasks that involve comparison and classification, assigning in class and homework tasks that involve metaphors and analogies. Then in summarizing and note-taking, the behavior associated with that would be verbal summaries, written summaries, taking notes, revising the notes, correcting errors, and adding information. And then a third one, according to category, would be reinforcing effort and providing recognition, and providing would be recognizing and celebrating progress toward learning goals throughout a unit, recognizing and reinforcing the importance of effort, recognizing and celebrating progress toward learning goals at the end of a unit. And then we want to look at homework and practice. As we look at homework and practice, the behavior associated with that would be providing specific feedback on all assigned homework, assigning homework for the purpose of students practicing skills and procedures that have been the focus of instruction. And remember that homework is only successful when there's a purpose associated with it. And then in the category of non-linguistic representations, this area deals with generating mental images, representing content that is drawing pictures or pictographs, asking students to construct graphic organizers, asking students to act out the content, asking students to make physical models of the content, asking students to make revisions in their mental images, pictures, pictographs, graphic organizers, physical modes, etc. Continuing with instructional categories, we add to that now cooperative learning. In the area of cooperative learning, the behavior associated with that is cooperative groups when they are appropriate, and also organizing students into ability groups when they are appropriate. Because remember, cooperative groups do not necessarily have to have anything to do with ability. So you have two different types of groups and possibly three different types of groups that we've spoken about on another PowerPoint presentation. Then we have setting objectives and providing feedback, that is setting specific learning goals at the beginning of a unit, asking the students to set their own learning goals at the beginning of a unit, providing feedback on learning goals throughout the unit, asking students to keep track of their progress on learning goals, providing summative feedback at the end of the unit, and asking students to assess themselves at the end of a unit. And then next we have generating and testing hypotheses, and this actually causes the students to really think as they're conducting their own research, engaging students in projects that involve generating and testing hypotheses through problem-solving tasks, through decision-making tasks, investigation tasks, experimental inquiry, through systems and analysis tasks, and testing hypotheses through invention tasks. And this is associated especially with the STEM initiatives and STEAM initiatives that many schools have right now. And then we'll look again at the questions, cues, and advanced organizers. And what we mean in this category would be, prior to presenting new content, ask questions that help the students recall what they might already know about the content. And also, prior to presenting the new content, provide the students with direct links with what they have studied previously. And then prior to presenting the new content, provide ways for students to organize or think about the content. And then the final category that we want to look at is, while we have all of the other types of instructional strategies that we've talked about, they're not helpful for the teacher unless you can get ideas of how to put them into lesson design. Now, Hunter figured out a way to do this. And here's this next section is Hunter's suggestion of how to put it into practice. Remember, that's the goal, to put research into practice. And you can find this in Hunter's article, Knowing, Teaching, and Supervising by Hunter. The first element will be the anticipatory set. And the description of this is a mental set that causes students to focus on what will be learned. It may also give practice in helping students achieve the learning and yield diagnostic data for the teacher. Secondly, we look at the objective and purpose. Not only do students learn more effectively when they know what they're supposed to be learning, that is important to them, but teachers more effectively when they have that same information. Then we look at input. Students must acquire new information about the knowledge, process, or skill they are to achieve. Now, to design the input phase of the lessons so that a successful outcome becomes predictable, the teacher must have analyzed the final objective to identify knowledge and skills that need to be acquired. And finally, in this section on Hunter's elements of lesson design, we look at modeling, checking for understanding, guided practice, and independent practice. Modeling refers to seeing what is meant as being an important adjunct to learning. To avoid stifling creativity, showing several examples of the process or products that students are expected to acquire or produce is always helpful. And when checking for understanding, before students are expected to do something, the teacher should determine that they understand what they are supposed to be doing and that they have the minimum skills required. Then in guided practice, the students practice their new knowledge or skill under the direct supervision of the teacher. New learning is like wet cement. It's easily damaged. An error at the beginning of learning can easily set so that correcting it later is harder than correcting it immediately. And then finally, on independent practice, we know that that's the time where we allow the students to go out on their own after the teacher is reasonably sure that the students will not make serious errors. After an initial lesson, students frequently are not ready to practice independently, and the teacher has committed a pedagogical error if unsupervised practice is expected. Of giving you a summary of of many of the instructional strategies that are out there is so that you can have several instructional strategies in your bag. Remember that the expert teacher has more effective strategies at his or her disposal than the ineffective teacher. May God richly bless you as you continue your work for Him in your area of His vineyard. Goodbye.